Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. Joining me, as always, the Prince of Twitter, the regentofredstate.com, Andrew Malcolm, of course, at AH Malcolm on the Twitterses, and one of the best tippers that I've got in blogging, because Andrew sent me over the CBS poll. We're going to talk a little bit about the CBS poll. But Andrew, thank you so much for sending that over to me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, you're the poll maven up here in the theater balcony, Waldorf and Statler. And so I thought you might be interested, and I hoped that you would tell us what it means today.
You know, it's interesting because, I mean, it does show a little bit of tightening taking place in the race. And
First,
it kind of
what does it show? What are they claiming?
It shows that, I mean, it claims that Harris is up by a point nationally, right? And then they have this very odd way of saying that it's tied in the battleground states, but they don't use the actual polling, right? Or at least not just the actual polling. They have some sort of weird data set that they're using to try to guess where these things are at. And my guess is that even though it's a YouGov poll, because that's their usual partner for this stuff, and they had 3,000 respondents, my guess is that they may not have had enough in each of the battleground states to have statistically reliable data. So they're bolstering it with data from other polls. And so they word this very strangely. But the national poll results are, was it 3,100 registered voters that they contacted for this. And it shows Harris up 50-49, which is, a virtual tie. And it's interesting, right? Because I think that what you're seeing here is a little bit of a honeymoon bump, mainly because she hasn't answered a single question from a reporter in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's weird, isn't it, Andrew?
It's totally weird. Totally weird. She's getting away with political murder here.
Yeah, political murder. Exactly. And look, I mean, it's not the only poll that shows things tightening up. The INI tip poll, Issues and Insights, a platform we're very familiar with because we have friends that are over there. Also shows Harris up 1, although they have it 46-45. Rasmussen, which is pretty Republican friendly, has Trump up 5. Daily Kos's civics poll has Harris up 4. I put that pretty much in the same category as Rasmussen these days, so I think that's a wash. You're seeing something of a bump. I mean, there's and those CBS and INI both have Harris +1, and they're both from the most recent data, right? We're talking from July 30th or 31st through August 2nd, which was Friday. So the Tuesday through Friday, Wednesday through Friday data. And this is going along in the same, it's going along just right after Donald Trump talked to the National Association of Black Journalists on Wednesday, right?
Yeah. It was a good idea, but he implemented it badly.
It was a good idea in theory. Actually, I was in a debate about this earlier today. It's a good idea in theory. I don't know.
It could have been. It could have been. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to get off. I want to come back to your poll, but political media 101 is, if you're going to go into the lion's den, let's see, Black journalists after the interview, after the convention in Chicago, 28% Black city. If you're going to go in there, you're going to know, 1, it's going to be hostile, and right. two, you don't have to answer the question. Make the question yours. Own it. So they ask you this thing about whether or not Kamala Harris is Black, and questioning whether district attorneys are really Black, and so on. And you say, I care about Blacks. I care about all Americans. And if you look at my record from the last administration, we had the lowest unemployment rate for Blacks in history. Okay. And then go on with what you did. You don't have to say, I wonder if Kamala Harris is really black. It's that's the gun is loaded. Don't go for that.
Yeah, I got to agree with you on this. It's a dumb road to go down because he's not the guy who has any real expertise in this. And I think what happened, I was talking about some of this morning, and I think what's happened is that somebody showed him a couple of articles about how black voters are questioning whether or not she's authentically black in the American sense, right? I mean,
Yeah,
she's Jamaican,
yeah,
her father's Jamaican, which is still authentically black. But, in terms of the American political identity,
right.
whether or not that works. The same question got asked about Barack Obama too, right?
Yeah,
And Barack Obama was pretty clever about countering that. He said, "Hey, I was in high school, and I felt in high school and college, I went through some of the same stuff. It really didn't matter if my father was from Africa or if I just had, African heritage. I still experienced the same, you know,
yeah.
condition in America," which is a smart way of going about it. Um, but that's something that, and I think probably somebody put the idea in Trump's head that this would be something that you could talk about in front of a black.
Oh no, jeez.
It's a bad idea.
And he after he got shot at, uh, he seemed to change. I don't want to. This isn't wishful because I'm pretty hard nosed. But he had a more genuine smile. It was a sweeter smile, and it's hard to describe it. But if you watched him at the convention where he was there the whole time, and his smile and his applause, even for Nikki Haley, and his remarks, he was being um, presidential, and he said himself that the shooting changed him. Uh, but then once Kamala Harris got into the race, he went back to his old punching down mode, and that's not productive. So I was hopeful for a while. I can still be hopeful, but it's it's uh, it's almost like he's trying to lose when he does some of
Yeah,
these punchback.
and that's what gets me to the poll, right? Because
Yeah, yeah. Get back to that.
if you look at this poll, let me bring it up here just to make sure that I have it handy here. The data in here shows you exactly how you need to operate in this environment, which is to go after her on the issues, because on the issues, she is, you know, less than
Yeah,
supported, right? There's two major issues. The two major issues in this election are the economy, at least in terms of what the voters' priorities have been. And this is consistent in every poll. Economy and immigration. Those are the two top issues, economy and immigration, because of the border crisis, the 3-year ongoing border crisis, millions and millions of people flooding across the border, and the Biden administration refusing to do anything about it, including borders are Kamala Harris, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Really.
and so, and there are other ancillary things. Inflation's part of the economy thing. Crime is part of kind of a little bit on the economy, but also part of the immigration thing.
Right.
Um, and crime is always a pretty decent issue in American elections anyway. It's sort of like a perennial issue with voters. So there's two issues that they talk. These two issues, crime and immigration and the economy. YouGov actually asked really interesting questions, right? The first one was, if X wins in 2024, do you think the policies would make you better off or worse off, right? So for the financial, and they asked it for both candidates, if Kamala Harris wins in 2024, do you think you'll be financially better off or financially worse off? Same thing with Donald Trump. And then if Harris wins, do you think her policies would increase the number of migrants trying to cross the border? Or, Donald Trump, do you think his policies would increase or decrease the number of migrants across the border, right? Same exact question asked fairly
Yeah,
of
yeah.
both candidates. And this is the interesting part. Only 25% of the respondents thought that Kamala Harris's policies would make them financially better off. 45% think Trump's policies would make them financially better off.
Yeah.
And smaller gap here because there's fewer that say stay the same when it comes to Trump, but 44% said Harris would make them financially worse off, and 38% said Trump would make them financially worse off. But Trump still has a 6-point advantage there. He's got a 20-point advantage going in the other direction. So why you're not talking about anything, or why you're not talking about anything other than the economy, I mean, I really don't get.
Yeah.
And then you look at the immigration one, it's even more the same thing. 52% of respondents, and this is the whole sample, right? 52% of respondents say Harris being president would increase the number of migrants trying to cross the border. And only 18% said she would decrease the number of migrants trying to cross the border. 72% of respondents in the poll think that electing Donald Trump will decrease the number of migrants trying to cross the border, and only 6% think it would increase the number of migrants trying to cross the border. They shouldn't be talking about anything other than
absolutely
economy and immigration. Those are great numbers, and it's one of the reasons why CBS didn't put those up on a card. If you'll notice that, they had all these little cards about enthusiasm. By the way, the enthusiasm thing that they talked about was overblown too. But I mean, how do you not just say, look at that and go, holy crap, this is all we need to talk about for the rest of the campaign. This is all we need to talk about.
Absolutely. And if you're going to go after Kamala Harris, let J.D. Vance do it. The vice presidential candidate is supposed to be the attack dog. And it saves Trump. He could look presidential and talk, I think, briefly about this disaster. By the way, immigration, I think, is a misnomer. I don't think all Americans are against immigration.
Yeah.
We're actually in the future, we're going to need it. It's the illegal immigration. It's stacking the deck. Biden intentionally, I assume, to create 10 million sympathetic Democrat voters in the future. He's all for that. And he did nothing to assuage it. In fact, he encouraged it by canceling Trump's temporary working policies. So you're right. I think it's the illegal immigration that is the problem. And we're going to pay for that for generations in education, cultural, financial, social welfare. I mean, we're going to be paying for this. And Trump can say he's going to deport people, and he might deport some, but the same thing's going to happen with the wall as happened with the wall. He gets into court, and then you have fights over that, and the wall never did get done, and Mexico didn't put a peso towards it. So it's a good idea. It's politically a great idea. But he should talk about those two problems, I think, like a flyover, and then get into what he wants to do. These elections are almost always about the future, and they should be. Who's going to vote? Well, some people are going to vote angry over what has happened, but I think most people want a future that's better. You can't change what's happened. You can be angry over it.
Absolutely, and and it's not just talking about the future. I want to get to your column because you talk about this, right?
Yeah.
And I do like to get to that. But I will say this election is going to be a referendum on something, right? It's either going to be a referendum on Kamala Harris or it's going to be a referendum on Donald Trump. And it's not going to be a referendum on Kamala Harris's skin color, as much as Donald Trump might want to make that the case. So you need to make it a referendum on her record that she's now claiming from the Biden administration, because she flat out seized that record last week. This is my record. I'll put my record up against Donald Trump's any day of the week on immigration. And
it's unusual that from day one, all the news releases about what the administration does came out, said the Biden-Harris administration. So she's tied to it intimately or tightly.
Yeah. I mean, and I mean, and she's owning it, right? She's grasping it. She's the one
Yeah,
that is
yeah.
actually saying, "Oh yeah, no, this is what I, this is." You can't get much more direct than that. And so, when you are handed that kind of an opportunity, you have to take it. You have to
Oh,
seize it
yeah, yeah.
and write it for all it's worth.
And
And
don't be angry. They don't. Americans don't like Biden, but they don't want an angry president. I think that was a large part of why they didn't elect him in 20. It's just, we want a president who's a president. And maybe
right,
he's a grandpa. He should be uh, a cogent grandpa. But and I don't think many people object to having a woman president, but an airhead woman president, no.
that's the thing. That's what you've got to get out there, and you've got to get out that the and I think they're doing this pretty well. That the media is complicit in
Oh
protecting
yeah.
Kamala Harris. So let's talk about your column about the mess that this election campaign is in. I mean, we could go more into the polls, but then we're starting to get into sort of the arcane data and stuff like that. I think just the biggest takeaway from the poll before we leave it is that yes, I think the race is narrowed. And what I think it is I think that Harris has kind of gotten back to the pre-debate status quo with the
Yeah.
electorate, which is a fairly narrow Trump lead. Trump's still leading in most of the battleground states. And we've seen the polls that are probably going to be the most friendly to Harris, which is the YouGov series, is it the Reuters Ipsos, and certainly PPP, which is a Democrat polling house anyway. And I think I want to see maybe another couple of weeks of polling
Oh
and
yeah.
look after the convention. I
Yeah.
think that she's gotten Democrats back to where they were at, which is not a bad thing for a
Yeah.
Democrat. But as soon as she has to get up and talk in front of a microphone in an extemporaneous fashion, not reading off of not doing, I
Right.
can
Right.
see where we are going, unburdened by where we have been.
Yeah.
Uh,
Exactly. Exactly. You know,
race.
um, she number one, as you said earlier, she hasn't taken any questions. Um, Neither one of them wants a debate. Trump doesn't want to give her the stage, and she knows that she'd blow it. So they're arguing over where to do it, and then they'll just throw up their hands in mock disappointment and say, oh, well, we can't do it. That's what's going to happen. She does have a honeymoon, as you pointed out. I think we taping this on Monday, and on Tuesday, she's supposed to announce her vice president partner. So there'll be maybe a little bump from that, at least in Pennsylvania or wherever he's from. And the convention, all that attention should give her maybe a bump. And her remarks will be all on the teleprompter that you can't see underneath the cameras. So she's looking straight at you and being honest and talking. But I don't think it's lasting. That one time she has spoken extemporaneously since they dumped Biden was at the return of the Russian hostages. And Biden claimed all the credit to the media from the media. And then she spoke extemporaneously and she gave it all to him. Oh, this is great. And best president
Yeah.
whatsoever. And then she started doing some airhead stuff. I ran the whole video at the bottom of my column on Sunday, what to make of this whole mess. So you can see it for yourself. And I quoted some of it within the words. It's she's she's awful, and I don't know how you improve it. I mean, Biden allegedly was a stutterer, and he got better at that. But I don't know how you improve.
Yeah. Biden's
Not
problem was stuttering, by the way.
No, the current problem wasn't, but he was, I guess, early in his career. Uh, no, it was senility was his problem. But
Yeah.
I don't know how you improve on an empty head. It's too late.
Well, and to some extent, that is the issue with Harris. It's just that it's not a, it's not a degenerative airheadedness. She's just an
Right.
airhead,
Yeah.
and you can't fix that. God, there's a great line from this movie I just absolutely adore called The Emperor's Club, and I
Oh,
can't think of
you
how it.
talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it goes something like youth ages, uh, um, drunkenness can be sobered, and ignorance can be educated, but stupid lasts forever. I don't think that's quite. I don't think I got it quite right, but
That's
it's pretty
close
close.
enough. Close enough. The uh, there's another one that is being stupid is like being dead. You are, but you just don't know it.
You're the last one to know.
Yeah, yeah, and it may not come to you. You may think, okay, this is all great.
It's a remake of The Sixth Sense, only this time I see stupid people.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. Yeah, yeah. Oh boy.
I mean, this prior to this, right? I think it was earlier in the same day, if I remember correctly. Earlier in the same day, she went out and delivered a short statement about the hostage swap, or prisoner swap, really is what it was, prisoner swap with Russia and Germany. And they put a podium up in front of the jetway to Air Force Two. Presumably it's Air Force Two. Any plane she's riding on is Air Force Two, whether or not it's the designated Air Force Two
Right.
or
It
not.
could be a drone.
Could be a drone. She could be riding a drone, I guess. But they put a podium up. She opens a binder. She reads something off the binder, closes the binder, and walks to the airplane without taking a single question.
No, of course not. Yeah.
And that was at least coherent because she was reading from a statement somebody prepared for her.
It's just like Biden. She's trying to play the Biden playbook.
And this was, I guess, getting back to that poll. I mean, I guess it's working a little bit, right? Again, because she hasn't had to be burdened by what has been. she's not being asked any questions by reporters yet. Now they did try to shout some questions to her at that little mini statement earlier in the day, but she didn't answer them. I guess you can get away with that until the convention, maybe. But I mean, at what point does
you can get away with it at the convention. I think you can get away with it at the convention.
At the convention, yes, but after that, she can't really get away with it.
Yeah, I think the honeymoon. This is not an unusually late convention. Interestingly, it's the same rough dates in Chicago for the Democrat convention as in 1968 when I was there.
Oh,
and I can, yeah, and I can tell you, tear gas stings. The radicals allegedly have been planning to do something at the convention, and the mayor, unlike Mayor Daley back in '68, is all for it. So we'll see how that goes down. That could be damaging, especially if it's, what is it, mostly peaceful rioting.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think you're right. And then comes Labor Day and the start of school, and we should really be in it. This is already the longest presidential campaign in our history.
Yeah.
So I would hope by the middle of September things would be settling out. It may still be close, but there's no way she should be ahead. I mean, it just, I'm sorry, on qualification. No, I'm not sorry. It's a fact.
Yeah.
She's just on qualifications. She shouldn't even be on it. She never took a vote had a vote in 2020. She quit. She got Tulsi Gabbard. There's an interesting story. Tulsi Gabbard destroyed her in that Democrat debate, and a day or two later in 2020, or was it 2019?
2019, yeah.
Yeah, Kamala quit. Um, and the organization of her campaign, I think it was her sister running it. It was chaos. But she's good for photo ops, impromptu photo ops, where remember she went into a women's clothing store and pranced around with a new coat and asked the reporters, how does it look? And all the girls giggled. And I mean, it was pathetic, but it was a photo op and it worked. I mean, it was like, oh, here's a normal woman. But they didn't even ask her about the sales tax or the price of milk or the price of bread, or they weren't going to do anything because they loved her.
Yeah.
So you would hope that by the middle of September, things are shaking out. And then I'm going to ask you about another poll when that time comes.
There you go. All right. Well, we'll keep talking about polls. I mean, it's election season. We're going to keep talking about polls. I want to bring up something else. We've got to just, a few minutes left. Over the weekend, and I've already written a post about this. By the time this goes up, that post will already be up. Over the weekend, the Daily Mail dropped a little bit of a mini bombshell in the race by reporting that second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, this is Kamala Harris's husband, had an affair while married to his first wife, which apparently led to him being able to get married again several years later. And that a pregnancy resulted, and the baby apparently was aborted. I'm not sure, or put up for adoption, one or the other. And he had an affair with someone who is, and this isn't clear, a nanny as well as the teacher at the private school that the Emhoff's kids were going to. And the divorce has since been very amicable. His ex-wife is supporting Kamala Harris. She and Kamala Harris are friends, and she really resented people taking a peek into this. And it's a story now, so I felt
there's an NDA and presumably a hush money payment, which I thought those were bad.
Well, I thought those were bad too. Supposedly that's true. The woman with whom he had the affair is not talking. And the Daily Mail names her. CNN didn't, because the Emhoffs, or not the Emhoffs, but Doug Emhoff, and went immediately to CNN when this thing came out and gave his side of the story and his, the thing for me is, I'm not necessarily sure that this is really that big of an issue for an election. He's not the candidate. His wife is. His wife didn't have anything to do with this. He didn't meet Kamala Harris until well after all of this transpired.
And their opponent has a mixed record in terms of marital fidelity.
And if it was Kamala Harris that was involved in something like that, and she was involved in Willie Brown. Well, Willie Brown was married, and they have been making a deal about that. And I probably should go back and add that in. I mean, at least it's the candidate you're talking about, not the candidate's spouse, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. And I was talking with colleagues about this today, and there's just kind of an ick factor for me that kind of reminds me of when people brought up Melania Trump's nude modeling photography, in 2016. And just to be clear, because somebody reminded me of that, I went back and took a look at that, and it wasn't the Democrats that brought that up. It was Trump's opponents in the Republican primary. It was a super PAC that was running specifically to oppose him.
It didn't work, and neither did the Hollywood Access tape.
Yeah, I don't think the Emhoff thing's going to work either, because in the end, I don't think anybody really cares about that when they go to the polls.
No, I think these days, perhaps unfortunately, but we've moved beyond that. I mean, what was her name? Lewinsky. Clinton actually advanced in the polls. I mean, in the midterm election in '98, which I happen to be working on, so it's etched into my memory.
Yeah, I mean, at least that was the candidate, right?
Yeah,
that was the office holder.
Let me be clear.
I never had sex with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
I had a Republican friend in Montana who was the funniest guy in the world. And he told me during that time, he said, if Clinton can convince the women of America that oral sex isn't sex. He deserves a third to
Or a Nobel Prize of some sort, right?
some sort. Oh my God.
Well, on that note, I think that's going to have to qualify for the joke of the week because I got an appointment
Yeah,
that I got
that's
to get
right.
off
You
to. But
got you go.
Andrew Malcolm, the Prince of Twitter, the Regent of RedState.com. We're going to come back and do this again next week, and we'll bring better jokes next week.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Ed. Thanks, everybody. See you then.